Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Zach is Cinema. You know, if you find yourself late at night finishing up a great movie that you just watched, and then you look to your left and just see another empty section of the couch and no one to talk to about what you just experienced, you have found the right place at Zach is Cinema. Welcome. We're glad to have you. Me and my 2 subscribers, one of which I think is just me from a different account, but still, you got a place here. Welcome home. We're continuing on our segment of our first-time watch reviews. So for anyone new joining us, the first-time watch review is basically an idea of taking a look back at some older movies, older franchises, movies I never grew up with, looking at it from that non-biased, non-nostalgic kind of viewpoint. Today we're sticking with the first-time watch review, sticking with our lovely Terminator franchise, because today our first-time watch review is our 4th Terminator movie, which is Terminator Salvation. So Terminator Salvation was released in 2009. It was directed by MCG. For writers, we got John Barcanto and Michael Ferris, starring Christian Bale, Sam Worthington, Bryce Dallas Howard, and Jane Alexander. The plot for Terminator Salvation is following the apocalyptic film, which takes place in 2018, focusing on the war between Skynet and humanity. The rest of the world's militaries have united to form a resistance and have set off to fight this war that we've been hearing about against Skynet. So with all my reviews, I kind of like to start off with why I'm even talking about this movie. So first, of course, Terminator Salvation does meet the criteria for first-time watch review. This is also one of the oddball movies in this franchise. It's actually the only Terminator movie that doesn't star Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's kind of in it. We'll get to that. But the only one that he's not one of our main characters. It's one of 2 movies in this franchise that actually have a PG-13 rating. So the first 2 are rated R, first 3 are rated R. This one's PG-13. Genesis is PG-13. And then Dark Fate brings it back to rated R. And then I was also just really interested and wanted to talk about this movie just because it doesn't get a lot of discussion. People kind of write it off as just one of the lame Terminator sequels, but this one is actually focusing on the war that we've been hearing about since the very first movie. So for Terminator Salvation, just jumping into the positives or the things that I really enjoyed in this movie. My first positive is you can honestly tell pretty immediately that this movie does feel a little bit different than our first 3 chapters. As a slightly darker edge, definitely darker than 2 and 3. And I think what impressed me the most is it has that gritty, darker edge while still maintaining that PG-13 rating. I like the gray and washed out color palette that they use in this as well. I think it adds to that more realistic, gritty kind of war movie that they have going on here. And I've heard some people give this shit that it doesn't stick with the trend of using the black and blue color palette tones that they use in the flash forward segments in 1, 2, and 3. But honestly, I don't mind this gray, dark, washed out kind of look. I think it brings a unique feature to this movie that the other 3 movies and the movies after this are different. So it kind of helps make this stand out a little bit more. And I don't really think I'd like to see a whole movie where it's just this pitch black with blue lighting in those flash forward scenes. I don't think it would really work for a whole movie. I think they kind of stand out a lot in those first couple movies just because of how different they are. But seeing a whole movie like that, I don't know. Maybe it would have worked, but I like the color palette that they chose for this movie. My next positive here is a lot of the effects hold up really well. I know it's not that old, 2009, but still. This is when in the early 2000s, CG was very prevalent. So it dates a lot of movies in the early 2000s, early 10s as well. But this one still holds up very well. It feels real, feels practical, feels gritty. There's great action set pieces that feel large and different, and they really, especially in some segments, all out with that war feature that this movie is bringing to our franchise. The tone and vibe fit really well for this movie because they're going for that post-apocalyptic war movie. It almost feels like a zombie movie, just like dark, gritty, void of any color or hope. And I think they really stick that well, just with that like kind of like zombie-esque post-apocalyptic vibe, not only with the color palette and the set pieces, but also like the survivors, the main characters that we're following. Like everyone just feels gritty on their last like hope. Everything's crumbling around them, and they stick that theme throughout the entire movie. Next positive here is I think it does continue on with what the first three did so well, is having these impactful and big moments, continuing to do something new and different. For example, they introduce in this movie this huge, big ass Terminator like machine, like something out of like Pacific Rim, but bringing it into like into this Terminator movie. It was so cool, had a great introduction as well, which makes it memorable. With this huge Terminator, something we haven't seen before, bursts through the scene, grabs this old lady and starts to massacre this entire village. So it's not only such a cool design, impactful moment, but it has a memorable introduction scene leading to a really great action set piece too. Jumping into my next positive, talking about some of our characters and actors here, really do love the Sam Worthington character and the Terminator twist that they bring to this. It's like this twist is a little bit obvious, but again, it helps to add something different and advances Skynet as a villain. Because in this one, some of my issues with the third one is they're rehashing, not really doing new or anything different. But this movie, they do something different. They show Skynet is evolving and advancing, and they bring a whole new element by bringing in this mix of human Terminator person in Sam Worthington's character that I think works really well. Little obvious, we'll get into that in some of the negatives, but I think overall, and especially the idea of it, is really awesome and something that I'd like to see possibly explored in a different Terminator movie too. Jumping off that too, about how most of these movies, especially this one, it shows Skynet as this evolving evil company, this evil entity. Another example of that is we might not have Arnold Schwarzenegger coming back, but we do have different versions of Terminators in this war. Like that big one we already talked about, they had like water, snake, eel kind of Terminators in a couple of these water scenes. They also had like Terminator motorcycles as well. Crazy stuff that you would see in a war. Because when Skynet's in this war, they do have to advance and adapt to the resistance, and I like that we get to see some of those small details of how they're doing that. And I think one of my biggest positives I can give this movie is I feel like they finally get the character of John Connor right. And I feel like I've seen some negative talk on this with Christian Bale's performance, that he's just like doesn't give much emotion, nothing really stands out about him. But I think those people are kind of going into the wrong expectations when you hear like Christian Bale is John Connor. You're like, oh shit, like the American Psycho guy, like he's gonna go like crazy, be really different. But no, I think he grounds this character. I think he does something very different from our 2 and 3 movies that was needed and necessary in this chapter as well. They cast someone great like Christian Bale, so he's a great actor. He pulls everything that they ask of him off in his scenes. But he does play that hardened military leader that is grounded and shows like little to no emotion. But I don't see that as a negative for this character. I think it is something that is needed and necessary for his character. I mean, holy shit, people, like he's in a war leading a resistance that he was kind of like thrown into. He's seen some shit. His fucking mom's died. Like, why would he be anything else? I went in just wanting to experience a new version of John Connor, and I got this grounded, realistic military leader type character for John. He's not annoying. He's not bratty. He's not poorly written like 2 and 3 in my opinion, but he brings something new but so simple. and I think it works for what he was going for. And I think they do give him a couple good like emotional scenes, especially that last scene. He does deliver on it. He delivers on the action, of course, and I just think his portrayal of John Connor really works, and I think they finally get him right. Jumping off that, I do love the ending as well. I think these Terminator movies, like we've talked about, wraps everything up nicely, concludes with its themes and messages right at the end of the movie, and I think this movie continues on that positive trend. In this movie, Sam Worthington's character ends up saving John Connor with that heart transplant surgery. So in order to save John Connor, John needs to accept help from this other Terminator in Sam Worthington's character. So I think it brings a nice emotional moment, continuing on those themes of what makes us human, the difference between AI and being a human. I think it helps to add not only to John Connor's character and Christian Bale's performance and portrayal of it, I think it also adds a lot to the Marcus character portrayed by Worthington as well. Marcus was a man that was flawed but rose up to become more than he was ever originally built for. So he ends up as a hero, just like John Connor did as well. It shows all those themes and sacrifices of what a resistance would bring to a war like this, continues on our Terminator themes throughout the franchise, and wraps up everything very nicely. And I do kind of like this ending, like narration scene. I know I gave the first two some shit for it, but there's a cool line in here. I believe it's delivered by John Connor saying, "There is no fate but what we make it." And I think that's like so simple, to the point, and not like over the top kind of like poetic-y dialogue. And an interesting fact about that line is they put it in this movie because it was actually in the original Terminator movie in 1984, but it was cut out by Cameron. It's kind of cool little Easter egg for some of the fans, shows that these directors and writers were paying attention to the small details in this franchise that so many people love. So I think it ends on that high note that we come to expect from a lot of these Terminator movies. But jumping into my negatives here, these are kind of a little bit nitpicky because I would say overall this was an extremely enjoyable movie. But one of my negatives here is the main plot is kind of silly and dumb when you start to think about it. They explain what's like kicking off our plot, kicking off our characters' journeys, as the Resistance found a shortwave transmitter that located a hidden signal under the rest of the communication transmitters that acts as some sort of off switch for the Terminator robots. Let's just all take a second and hear what I just said. They found a transmitter located under a hidden signal under the rest of the communication transmitters. It's like a bunch of just nonsense. What I just said there, I didn't say anything. I literally said nothing, but that's what kicks off our plot and sets our story in motion. So like, sure, in the moment it works. You're like, oh yeah, they found another transmitter and it can act as a off switch, and it's like underneath the other communication transmitters, and then it's like a quick thing in the movie, so you're like, okay, but then the more you think about it, and thinking about it as I was preparing for this video, I'm like, that's bullshit. Like, what does that even mean? And then my next kind of negative here is I feel like they started this in 3, continued it in this 4th one, but these callback lines like "come with me if you want to live" are just so like out of place and forced in, and they just like always take a second to like pause at the camera and be like, "Hey, you remember that line, don't you, you motherfuckers? Well, you're gonna get it again in every movie." They like look at the camera and it's like, okay, I get it, you're referencing a better movie, but why? And that's just what I'm kind of left with. In my next negative, I talked about Sam Worthington, Marcus's character, as a good, interesting twist. And it is. I still believe that, but I think it was a little bit obvious, and I wish they hit it more so it could be a revelation to not only John, but the audience as well. While I was preparing for this video, I didn't realize they actually fucking spoiled this like in the trailer, in the marketing, which is insane that they would do that, because in the movie, they treat it as a secret and it's supposed to be this big revelation, and they just just show it in the trailer. But I think they show their hand with this twist too much. There's multiple scenes where he Marcus's character survives a crazy fall. I think one time off like a plane, like lands in some water and like skips like a stone across the water as like the plane debris is like crashing all around him, and he's like totally fine. And when I first watched that, I'm like, whoa, wait, that's bullshit. Like, how did he survive that? And then you start thinking, I'm like, oh, well, the surgery that he went into in the beginning, like, I think something's up with that. And yes, he is half human, half Terminator, which is interesting. It is cool. It works for the story, but they show their hand, destroyed it by the marketing, something that really could have elevated this movie, I think. And then jumping into my next negative here is I think this movie definitely should have been rated R. I think the action holds up. There's a lot of cool action moments for our characters in this movie. But if they were going for this like gritty, semi-realistic war movie, post-apocalyptic movie, it should have been rated R. I wanted to see some crazy Terminator carnage, human carnage, like people being blown up. Show me something real so we could add to the stakes of this movie. It's just such a weird choice that our first 3 movies were rated R, and then they're like, all right, we're finally getting to this big battle, the resistance battle that we've been hearing about, this epic war, but let's make it PG-13. It's just like, why this movie? Like, why would you do that? Like, it makes no sense. And it never really bothered me when I was watching the movie, but just like thinking back on it, I'm like, this movie could have been even better if it was rated R and stuck with that war carnage. I think it's something that would have really elevated this movie too. But jumping back to the twist with Marcus's character, it is a cool twist, but again, I think the more you think about it, it just, again, like we were talking in Terminator 3, the more these movies continue on, and more it strains credibility on Skynet's impending doom and this great evil threat. Why would they make a Terminator that's half human, half Terminator that could feel, have emotion, and resist orders? Like, you're just setting yourself up for trouble. And I know they needed to like continue the plot of the movie too, but it just like, it makes no sense from Skynet's point of view. They throw in some bullshit line about saying they did this because the other Terminators weren't working, and we saw the first 3 failed in the first 3 movies, and it's like, okay, so then why would you make it half human, half Terminator, something that still has emotion and that could help out the human characters? Like, it just doesn't make sense for Skynet to do that. It makes sense for them to want to advance, learn from their mistakes, but they do this in kind of a stupid way the more you kind of think about it. I don't think it ruins the twist for me. More in general, as these movies continue on, it's easy to poke holes in Skynet's like big plan. Next negative here, small one, that old CGI Arnold scene. It was cool. It was a cool little fan service moment. The action scene's cool, but the CGI does look like garbage. I don't know why they couldn't just like maybe because he's old. Okay. Yeah, not thinking about it, I guess they'd have to CGI it. It just doesn't hold up very well. Another negative here, kind of continuing on with some of my issues with like the plot and story. I believe if I'm remembering correctly, at one point, Skynet does capture and has Kyle Reese and John Connor. And like the whole point of this is to make sure that like John Connor isn't like born and can lead this resistance. And they know that. So they had a couple opportunities specifically in this movie to execute John Connor or like Kyle Reese. They had chances to do it, but except they just like hold them captive. That way Marcus can come in and like save the day. It's more of a writing issue. I just wish there was like, maybe they could have given like Skynet just like a reason why they had to keep him alive for that brief like couple of days or something. But they don't even like bother to come up with a reason. So those are like the last couple negatives I had. Really, honestly, I know I had a lot of specific negatives, but overall I think this is a great and fun Terminator movie that I think gets a lot of unnecessary hate. A lot of story issues, but it's so easy to look past because it helps to advance the story, makes John Connor's character a little bit better, and finally lets us see this like war between the Resistance and Skynet AI Terminators. Like, finally get to see it, and it does leave an impacting, lasting impact on the audience as well. Since I've seen the rest of this franchise, it sets itself up for, a pretty interesting like sequel that could have like wrapped everything up. I wish we got that sequel, and I hope maybe one day. Who knows? My rating for this movie is I own it on Blu-ray, part of that box set that I do have. I'm glad this one takes up a little bit of room in there because I will be rewatching this one, and if they ever made a 4K copy of this movie, I would consider buying it if it was on sale. So that's my rating for this movie. Thanks again, everybody, for watching some ZakIsCinema, talking about Terminator Salvation. I will be continuing on finishing up our Terminator reviews, probably do a ranking after. So look forward to that. Let me know below your thoughts and feelings on Terminator Salvation. I'm kind of curious about this one because I think I'm in the minority of really enjoying this sequel. I think it's really good and enjoyable. So let me know down below what you think. Let me know any other first-time watch or nostalgic reviews you might like to see in the future. And again, I really, really, really appreciate anybody watching these first couple videos as I'm trying to figure everything out. Thank you again. Look forward to some more ZakIsCinema movie reviews coming very soon.